we are currently in World War III. It's just, it doesn't look like wars that we've had in the past. There are lots of different global wars going around all over the place over various different things. And then we've got the economic trade war coming on top of that, with China and Russia and the BRICS nations sort of trying to fight the US, and the US desperately trying to cling to its remaining power, backed up by its enormous arsenal, which is what everybody's actually afraid of. And where do we go from here? How do we get things into a way where we move away from physical conflict and more into, we actually just want to trade with each other? It's the same old war that it's always been. So history doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes. And this is the collective versus the individual. And the West's model for decades, since World War II, basically, and probably before then, a long time before then, has been around individual property rights. It all started with Magna Carta and the rest of it, so since 1200. And the direction has always been moving in the direction of taking away power from centralized controlling elites of whatever flavor, and distributing and decentralizing that power and that sovereignty back to the level of the individual. And the hopeful thing that everyone should take out of this is that that always wins. There is nothing that the collectivists can do that will allow them to win.
Yeah, they still try.
They're going to try, they're going to thrash about, and they're going to destroy as much stuff as possible. That's why you see all the Democrats in the US, all the collectivists, they're the war hawks. They're the ones that want to spend your money overseas, transfer your money to foreign countries that they don't tax, they don't get anything from, import all the refugees, and send your kids to die in foreign wars that you have nothing to do with. Could we please stop doing that? How many Russians have died? How many Ukrainians have died? How many Palestinians have died? How many Jews have died in Israel? Israelites have died in Iran. Why are we doing this? And it's all just this same individualist versus collectivist mindset. And the collectivists are the fascists, and the communists and the socialists are the collectivists, and the individualists sort of fit into the libertarian category on the other side. And as soon as other people start to tell you how you can deal with your property, they're really taking away your individual property rights. And cryptocurrency solves that problem. There is absolutely nothing that anyone can do to take my Bitcoin off me without my consent. I have to consent all transactions, and that's the way it should be. And if the New Zealand government wanted to put me in prison, okay, that's literally all they can do. If they put me in prison for the rest of their life, it makes no difference to me. They are never getting my Bitcoin without my consent. And I pay my taxes in Bitcoin. Well, I have to. That's my actual tax obligation. I'm not suggesting anyone goes and violates the law, but I am suggesting that people take sovereignty over their own assets and wealth, which includes the tokenization of property and everything else, and all the rest of the tokenization of everything. But it also includes taking sovereignty over yourself and your labor and your finances. And the best thing you could do at the moment is almost sell up your real world property assets, leave it in Bitcoin, because that is the safest place at the moment. Will it always be? Probably not, because things evolve and things change. And so we'll see where it goes. But that is the tool that I would like to use to get us to that stage.
So the main idea with this episode is Bitcoin creating some sort of political revolution? And high-level thoughts just to start with, John, what do you think?
I think the answer to that question is basically yes. I think it is, because it is allowing people to have more choice and control and sovereignty over themselves, their labor, and their property. And I think that's where it's going. And it is a decentralized movement, so it is not centralized in one specific point. It is sort of all of us making a lot of our independent choices about the way that we deal with our property and our labor that we finally get to do for ourselves. But that has been the history of sort of currency throughout the ages. We're looking for things that hold value over the long term and that allow us to have sovereign control over it, whether that be gold and silver coins, collecting those in your farmhouse or whatever, or nowadays collecting Bitcoin. The advantage of Bitcoin in this case, though, is there is no amount of force that can be applied that forces you to do a non-consensual transaction.
What about the relationship then between, say, governments and money? Because when we talk about, say, this tussle between the individual and collectivism, the money is like the key issue, isn't it? Because if you can control the money, you can control the world, right?
A little bit more basally, it is about individual property rights.
Okay.
And so money is a tool, an extension of our individual property rights to transact in immediate exchange with each other. And for a very long time, governments have been destroying the ability to store our wealth and time shift our labor into the future, which is what money is. It is, we do work now, you advise a client, I advise a client, we get paid now. We might not want to spend it directly now, but it allows us to transfer and time shift our labor into the future to resolve the double coincidence of wants.
It's preserving our human time and energy, our labor for future use, to release it through and there's a medium or a store of value, right? And that's money.
That's right. That's where money sort of falls in. And inflation is this little obfuscated tax that sits around in the back of all these governments. It does come from sort of, the reason why the target is 2% is because gold inflates at about 2% a year.
Interesting. Okay. I
I
haven't heard about this before.
So that started in New Zealand, apparently.
That's right.
That's what I heard. There's 2%. And the reason why I was selected is because that's the inflation rate of gold.
The average person's working life during that period of time, $100 at the start of your career would end up being $50 at the end of your career based on a 2% inflation target.
Yep.
It's currency debasement on purpose by design, and it's completely transparent. It's obvious, and no one seems to go, where does that come from, and why are we doing that? But it's because of gold. It's because of the natural rate at which we can extract gold.
That's right.
And so they're trying to what, mirror that?
Yeah. It is sort of an effort to mirror that to back in the sort of 60s and 70s when the US dollar was tied to gold. In fact, most of our fiat currencies were tied to gold. That was now broken. And sort of this is a bandage patch on it for two reasons. One, to make it more acceptable and palatable to the public, because that kind of gold inflation rate is actually known. People know that this happens. And also because it allows them to effectively spend an extra 2% of your country's GDP every year for free. And people ask for the governments to give them more and more stuff. But to give somebody something, you have to take it from somebody else. There is no such thing as a free lunch. That is just not a thing.
Debt and credit.
That's right.
That's why there's debt and credit. So just going back a little bit, though. So you were referring to 1971, Richard Nixon takes the US dollar off the gold standard. Before that, Bretton Woods Agreement, New Zealand dollar, for example, the Australian dollar, whatever the currency is, you could trade it for the US dollar, and then that dollar was somewhat pegged to gold. But since 71, funnily enough, when all the other issues seem to begin, or not began, it's terrible English.
You're kind of right, though. You trace everything back. It's like, where did things start to go awry? And it's when we moved away from having sound money, which gold falls into that category, and the fiat at that stage was fairly sound because it was tied to gold. And we moved away from that to allow our governments to effectively steal from all of us without voting, without referendums, without any consideration for us at all. They just dilute the money supply.
But it's central bank independence, right? We're separating money in the state. That's a good thing. But it's also a way, I guess, to contract out and to claim that it wasn't us that did this. It's just how they're operating, right?
Now you've hit on a very important issue right here. And this is the personal responsibility. And what everybody does all the time is try and shift the blame from themselves to other people. And we get that all the time. This is a good example. Is like the politicians can stand up and say, well, you should vote for me. It's like, but you destroyed my business. You wrecked my currency. You've made us poor. It's like, oh, it wasn't me. It was the Fed. Well, they're not elected. So we've abdicated our responsibility for taking control of our own individual sovereignty, and we've outsourced it to an organization that has a history of making things worse and making us poorer. We're not doing anything about that. But if we at least store our value for our labor in Bitcoin, there is nothing any government can do to steal that from us. They have to provide a valuable service. So yes, this is something that I want to vote for.
Because we're using a form of money that is ours. We own the money. Whereas right now, the money that most of us are using is effectively government money or central bank money. And therefore they are programming that money to lose value, to drip that value out at 2% a year on average. And we're accepting it. And as long as we all accept it and we refuse to use alternative forms of money, and now increasingly there's less excuse, then we're effectively allowing ourselves to be stolen from. And whose fault is that? It's not necessarily the government's fault. It's our fault, right?
It's our fault.
Yeah.
It's our fault. We're abdicating our responsibility. And in a lot of cases, that can be fine. Like sometimes you do want to outsource things to valuable services for other people.
That should be your choice, right?
Yeah, it should be your choice.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the whole point around this.
Before we go too far, tell us what your story is. Why are we having this conversation? Like, what do you do for work? What are you really passionate about?
The best way I've had it is that I'm a business performance specialist. So I will come into whatever businesses you've got running at the moment and very quickly and easily identify any of the problems that you're having at the moment, and then I just fix them. And my main goal for the CEOs and the general managers is that they need clear headspace. And I know I need that for running my business as well. I often need quite large periods of time where I might be playing golf or doing a game or be on holiday, going water skiing, whatever. But it's giving me that headspace to think about the overall direction of where I want my business to go from where it is now and where I'd like to see it in the next 6 to 12 months. And a lot of owners of businesses, they get inundated with so much small administrative tasks that their whole stack is admin. And then it never gives them a chance. They don't feel like they're growing because they're not. They're just getting stuck doing admin, treating water. And so I help them identify what those are and then take active steps towards resolving those issues.
Tell me about the legal side.
Well, I am a qualified lawyer. I'm a barrister solicitor for the High Court of New Zealand. I do not hold a practicing certificate, so technically nothing I say is legal advice. It's strategy advice. I consult on high court cases fairly regularly. I've done a couple in the last 2 years. So while I'm not going to court specifically, I am consulting with the barristers behind the scene and then pulling together, using a lot of AI technology, pulling together all the threads that the barristers want to pursue in court and then putting it in a really nice, clear, easy document for them. That's pulling all the discovery documents as well. And sometimes there's thousands of pages in those. But AI makes that so much easier to just pull out. I think the last one I did, there was about 4 quotes in like 800 pages.
Wow.
And we really, really needed those. So we got them.
I remember actually talking to you last time around that when you were on the podcast, probably 2 years ago. And I think you were talking about how technology is going to insanely transform the legal industry. And we're now here. And
I'm doing
it is.
And I'm by no means an early adopter. I like to wait and see that evidence comes out around these things. So I'm a little bit late to the game in a way.
Yeah.
But I think we talked about this briefly earlier. Humans are the tool using species. And we get a lot of people, oh, I'm afraid of this technology. I'm afraid of this. It's like, it's just a tool. And it's going to replace some jobs, but we'll do what we always do and find other jobs.
Yeah.
You think about the Luddites in the Industrial Revolution in England, destroying all the looms because they were the seamstresses. And it's, oh, my job's been taken away. It's like, okay. But I know seamstresses now who make drag costumes for drag queens and they charge $8,000 a pop. So your jobs haven't gone, just that specific thing. The way that we use those tools might have to change. And what you end up getting is probably a lot more people being technicians and engineers and deeply understanding how the technology works because they're the ones servicing it to make it do the objective, which is generally to try and be more cost effective and more efficient in the way that we try to achieve our objectives.
It's the next stage in terms of figuring out how to use the hammer, fire, computer, AI now.
Yep.
We'll adapt.
Remember that you're still in charge. These are tools. You need to read what your ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok gives back to you. You need to go through that, and you need to also have a deep understanding of the material that you've given it so that you can pull it up when it makes mistakes, because it does all the time.
I think it's what I really enjoy about it is that it's an amazing opportunity to learn.
Oh, yeah.
It takes me 35, 45 minutes to get to work every day. And on the way in, I'm having an audio conversation with this bit of technology and I pick a topic. It could be anything I want. It's amazing.
It's so good. Have you done a strategic social optimization chat?
No.
Do that.
Okay.
Do that. So I got the idea from Dr. Mike Erzatel, he's a bodybuilder on YouTube. He said, yeah, I give ChatGPT all the information about me. I include transcripts of meetings and things that I've had, but I'm not looking for specifics around the meeting. What I'm trying to draw out of it is personality defects that I have. And this comes back into the individual responsibility. Like, I'm responsible for me in the way that I interact with people. And so I give it conversations that I've had, and I'll tell it about it. And then I have an argument with ChatGPT. And it will say, well, you could do this better. This is an area in which you can improve. Maybe you can reframe the way that you say things. So I'm very blunt. I'm very direct. That doesn't often work for a lot of people. If I've got a particularly emotional client, I need to change my approach. I need to change the language that I use and frame it in a more emotional way for them. And that helps us get better results because now I'm talking to them in a language that they understand. So yeah,
Cool.
it's you should 100% you should try it. Transcript your podcasts and just stick them in and say, these are the interesting conversations I've had. Tell me about myself.
Yeah. It's almost scary, right? It's almost like you don't want to know, or even just record yourself having a conversation with a friend, with their permission, of course, and then put it in there and just say, why did they never invite me out at once? Because you chew with your mouth open. I don't know. There could be something weird like that, right?
It will pull those little things out.
Yeah.
It's amazing at doing that.
Yeah.
And I had given access to my ChatGPT. I've spent about 2,000 hours probably training now. There are a few other people that have access to my professional subscription. And so when they're asking for responses, it's thinking like me. So they're getting incredibly efficient and incredibly direct answers to the problems that they're having.
And so while this AI thing is going on, there's also this Bitcoin thing that's going on, or this crypto thing. And so I think it's interesting how they're both kind of happening at the same time, right?
Yeah. Have you asked ChatGPT what currency it would use?
No.
The answer is Bitcoin.
Interesting.
If ChatGPT had to pick a currency, because it holds value over time, it's relatively fast and easy to transact with. Yeah, the costs are a bit bigger than some of the other cryptos, but if it had to pick one, it's going with Bitcoin initially.
Fantastic, because that helps me lead into my next question, which is, if you were to choose one yourself, like if you were to say, because this happens to me all the time, cryptocurrency is so crazy, there's so many different options, how do I know which one is going to be the one that survives? What would you say your crypto of choice is?
What objective are you trying to achieve?
Well, let's start with maybe a medium of exchange versus a store of value.
So if I had to pick one for medium of exchange, I'd probably go with XRP. It's not a good long-term store of value because Ripple holds somewhere around 50% of the remaining XRP. They're doing this on purpose because the goal of that is to have as little inflation of XRP as possible. So as the price goes up, they'll release a bit more into the market and it brings the price down. And you can't have a personal transaction currency. Like Bitcoin is really bad for this actually, because it's really expensive and it's really slow, particularly compared to XRP. And I think that's where the Swift banking network is going to move to, something akin to XRP, or at least it will run on an XRP-based blockchain. And I think if you're looking at physical asset, real world property ownership, whether it be glasses, shirts, jackets, houses, whatever, that's likely to be somewhere in the Ethereum space or Ethereum-like.
Okay.
And if you're looking for long-term store of value, that's the Bitcoin space.
Interesting.
And so the question is not which cryptocurrency I should use, but is what is my use case, and then using the most appropriate cryptocurrency for that use.
Right. And I think that's an interesting thing to point out, right? Because the way that the investment thesis has evolved for crypto, for good or for evil, has been, which is going to be the most valuable? Like, is the token itself going to be the most valuable? Therefore, let's own a bunch of XRP versus Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin. But there's quite a big difference between utility and a store of value. Well, store of value, I guess you could call that a utility as well. That's its purpose. But one is very different from the other. So if we're thinking about an investment thesis, and I would go even further and say, if we're thinking about a savings technology, there is no other option apart from Bitcoin. That's right. Because that's the only thing that you can be guaranteed, not guaranteed.
Nothing is guaranteed
in the world.
No.
But that's the only one out of all of them that you could say is most likely to succeed in life.
Because its purpose is long-term storage of value. So your objective here is to store my value of my labor and my property through time. And the best use case for that is Bitcoin presently. That's not to say it is the last version. There'll be new versions and things. And that's what you should look out for, is which ones are going to best fit the use case that I'm using. And so what I might end up doing, although I transact almost exclusively in Bitcoin now, is I might end up holding my monthly float in XRP for low transaction fees and fast transactions, and hold the majority of my wealth in Bitcoin and my assets on as an NFT somewhere in Ethereum.
This is interesting, right? So like there's a bunch of different views in the crypto space. Some people will be Bitcoin maximalists, and we're not going to use it unless it is on the Bitcoin chain or second layer chain, right? But you're of the view that it's what is the best tool for the function.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, you don't use a hammer to cut a steak. You go and get a knife. What? That's the best use case for the tool that you've got. Okay. And people call me a Bitcoin maxi because I'm set almost exclusively in the Bitcoin space. I don't really hold much XRP or Ethereum, although I do have a little bit. I sit pretty much in the Bitcoin space just because I don't have a good use case for the other ones right now. But to take such a narrow view and just focus on one single currency, I think is very short-sighted. And I think that's partially what gets me to think more about the long term with Bitcoin, is because it retains its value in the long term, you have to consider the opportunity cost into the future. And I think that will help get rid of this very short-term thinking that we have with fiat currency. And this is something everybody complains about. Oh, election cycles are too short. Oh, the money just gets all spent. Of course it does. Why? Because in 3 years' time, it's going to be worth nothing. So you have to spend it today. And then you have to spend it on credit, because it's better to spend the money on credit now and then pay it back with less valuable dollars in the future. And so you get this perpetual cycle of short-term thinking all the time. Everyone's trying to spend everything they have right now. But if you look at the Bitcoin, it's like, well, since a month or two ago, since February, we went from what, $72,000 to $122,000. So when I'm buying a coffee, or when I'm purchasing something for my car, I have to think about the opportunity cost of the future use of that Bitcoin. Because if I retain it, I will have effective more spending power in the future. But if I spend it now, I have to be sure that that's what I want to spend it on, and I'm going to get lots of value out of that thing.
And I guess it would probably be not too dissimilar if we were to draw a parallel to, say, the different asset classes of today, equities, fixed interest, cash. You wouldn't necessarily be spending your equities on, say, that trip to Fiji or Honolulu in 3 months' time, because you'd be thinking about the opportunity cost of spending your investment. It should be a long-term hold, right?
That might be worth it, though. Like maybe taking your wife and kids to Fiji is just what you need at the moment.
No, but I mean in terms of like the opportunity cost of you're spending the wrong type of money for the wrong time frame.
Yeah.
So if you could spend your investments as if they were currency, and I guess when you think about the different forms of money that we have access with cryptocurrencies, it's the same sort of thing. We have to think about the different classes there, perhaps.
And we do it already. So the best long-term storage value that most people, particularly in New Zealand, but also around the world, use is property. And how do you make your property value liquid? You get a mortgage. And now you've got liquid cash to use against the assets that you've got, which you want to spend as fast as you possibly can. And so Bitcoin is very similar. I saw an article today that one of the courts in Australia has just approved Bitcoin for mortgage use.
Wow. Okay.
Like that is going to change the game. And so you'll be able to loan money against your Bitcoin. I don't quite know why you'd want to do that, but as these services become more available, you will be able to extract the value out of those things, and it will be more applicable in sort of your everyday life. And I think it probably will replace property as a good long-term store of value. And so when you're looking at a house, I mean, I rent now because that's the most efficient thing for me to do. And the way that rents and mortgages and things are working in New Zealand with our current interest rates makes that a really viable option to keep things relatively low cost for me, so that I can save into the future for when I actually do want to buy a house. And when I find those interest rates and the mortgages come down to near rent, that's the time you should look at buying. People just don't think about things in economic terms, though, and I wish more people would, because economics is such a good way to describe everything in our lives.
Yeah. On the theme of Bitcoin, then, my whole kind of theory is, and it's not my theory, of course, but my question, I guess, I'm trying to validate is Bitcoin creating some sort of political revolution? And it starts with me as a person. It then moves into other things, like, say, publicly listed companies. And then I think about it more broadly. What would it look like if more of our economy ran on a Bitcoin standard? How would that change the incentive structures? And so we've kind of already unpacked a little bit about how you view Bitcoin yourself. And if we think about, say, these Bitcoin treasury companies, MicroStrategy, Now Strategy is one of the many. In your view, do you feel like what Michael Saylor has done with Strategy is something that any publicly listed company should be doing to, I guess, create long-term value? Because what they're doing is they're wrapping themselves around Bitcoin. They're making that Bitcoin kind of like the heat inside of it.
I really like what Michael Saylor is doing. I have nothing bad to say about Strategy. I think his strategy is excellent, and I think it is demonstrably excellent. So I think it's a good way to do things. But we can't just have a situation where you're hoarding Bitcoin. Bitcoin in of itself doesn't do anything. That needs to be invested into productive means of production so that you can produce more income, preferably in Bitcoin. But you need to think very carefully about how you want to deploy that capital in the future. So people are worried about Tesla hoarding. They're worried about MicroStrategy hoarding Bitcoin. You can't, because at some stage you have to trade with other people. You have to pay your employees. You got to pay the rent on your building. You got to pay power, water, electricity. So you are going to be trading those Bitcoin away with other people, with whatever card you want to use. Coinbase in the US, for example, will let you have that Visa credit card. You can then spend that Bitcoin on things that you find are more valuable than just holding the Bitcoin. But it's going to give you pause and make you think about the opportunity cost of those decisions a bit more. So you don't lose anything by retaining the Bitcoin. Whereas in fiat, you feel like you are forced to make quick and hasty decisions because tomorrow it's going to be worth less. And you'll be able to buy less capital and less power and water and phones and internet and all the other things you need to be a successful business. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. I suspect Strategy will end up in a financial service product where they're going to lend the Bitcoin out to people for productive means. You want to buy a new factory, you want to invest in a new piece of equipment. Those are the kind of things where that Bitcoin wealth is going to be deployed sort of in the future. And it cannot be hoarded because you have to trade with other people. There is no getting around those facts.
Some might describe Michael Saylor as a save and stack maxi, right? Like it's never selling. And I can kind of understand that, I guess, for this season and time, because just like anybody investing for the long term, you go through an accumulation phase, then a decumulation phase. A little bit different with say, this company and this strategy, especially using Bitcoin. There'll be a phase of accumulation, but then there'll be a phase where deployment.
Uh-huh.
So you're suggesting it's probably going to be in some sort of financial services thing where they lend it out, perhaps?
If I was Michael Saylor, that's where I'd be looking. I think a lot of our current financial systems can be replicated in cryptocurrency in a much more safe and compliant way.
Yeah.
We're in a situation where there's 8.5 billion of us on the planet. There's that disconnection between all of us. We are moving towards more low trust societies. So our currency needs to be zero trust, which is what Bitcoin is. If we did a transaction that is permanent and irrevocable, which, by the way, is the definition of settling currency for property in New Zealand, it has to be irrevocable once that transaction is made. It's like, well, I think I said this to Ian Wolford of the Reserve Bank. It's like, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? We've got a currency that can do that right now, that does irrevocable transactions, much more irrevocable than fiat, which banks and things can call back. The governments can call back. So if we're moving to that system, it'll be interesting to see how that Bitcoin accumulation capital is deployed, because it cannot be accumulated. You look at kings and monarchs, kings and queens in history, right? Well, they have a huge pile of gold. Great. That's a good long-term store of value. Your neighbors the French send troops to England, the Norman conquest in 1066, you now have to deploy your gold to defend your realm. So there's no way that even if it increases in value that you can retain that, because you have to pay for other people's services. Otherwise, you'll get it all taken off you. So Bitcoin is very much in that same sort of vein.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be accumulated. It will be spent.
Interesting.
I've done accumulation.
Yeah.
I also spend Bitcoin. I do my transactions and I invoice my clients in Bitcoin. I pay my income tax in Bitcoin. My accountant I give him all my transaction history from my credit cards, from my Wirex credit cards. And we just do the accounting. It's all just numbers.
Yeah.
So what do I owe the government? Well, this amount. Okay. Here you go.
Yeah. Just a unit of account.
It's just a unit of account. It's just in tiny decimal places rather than enormous, ridiculous fiat numbers.
Yeah. So if we were to extrapolate his strategy right now, Michael Saylor with strategy, gobbling up all this Bitcoin, using all sorts of really interesting and sophisticated financial instruments to basically suck traditional capital out of traditional markets and then convert it into digital scarcity. Over time, though, because of the finiteness of Bitcoin, do you think it's possible that self-custodied Bitcoin, like Bitcoin that you can acquire directly and hold in your own digital wallet, not through an ETF, not through owning shares in a publicly listed company, do you think that self-custodied Bitcoin will, like in a sense, attract the premium?
Well, I don't answer that question. We're in the early stages of watching Bitcoin, so we haven't found the market equilibrium point. But everything always tends towards the market equilibrium point. I have no idea what that Bitcoin price is going to be in fiat currency, and it will continue to increase as long as our governments keep devaluing our currency.
Which they have to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the first country that devalues its currency to zero by printing an infinite quantity of it and buys Bitcoin wins. And that's what Michael Saylor is doing. He doesn't have the power to print currency, but he is trying to do exactly the same thing. And that's what's going to make companies like Strategy win sort of the competitive war, because their value can't be stolen. They're still going to have to try. It is going to have a premium, I suppose, but only until it reaches that market equilibrium point. And as the more transactions increase and the market cap increases and more people start transacting it, the rate at which it increases is going to decrease. This is just basic analysis. And it will eventually reach that market equilibrium point, and that will be the price of Bitcoin.
Sure. But that's after it's absorbed the maximum amount of capital that it could absorb, right?
Yep.
And I guess if, say, Strategy eventually, or Tesla, or any of these other companies that have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, if they eventually went and they just lost their wallet, or they were hacked or whatever, right? Or just disappeared forever, then I guess that just makes the amount of Bitcoin in circulation that much smaller.
It does.
And we just get there that much faster, don't we?
We just go into more decimal points.
Yeah.
I think you can have millions decimal points, so 6 zeros at the moment, but there's no reason you can't divide it further. We can have literally infinite zeros in front of any Bitcoin transaction. So what have we lost? 4 to 6 million Bitcoin already? Something like that.
Yeah.
It makes no difference.
Yeah.
All it does is change the supply and therefore what the market equilibrium price is.
Yeah.
And that is the trading pair between Bitcoin and eggs, Bitcoin and bread, petrol, between New Zealand dollars.
Yeah.
And that will eventually find its market equilibrium point,
right,
preferably without government intervention.
Yeah.
Would be fantastic. If we've got separation of church and state, we need separation of state and economics.
Yeah.
That's where we need to head.
Totally. Well, on that separation of state and economics, we're in an interesting time right now. We've seen Donald Trump come into office more recently. The union that Elon Musk and Donald Trump seem to have formed pre-election has kind of, well, they've parted ways, right? There's been a massive schism, and increasingly it feels like there's a couple of fault lines here. One is the Epstein files. The other one is the national debt, and the seeming unwillingness, I guess, to actually deal to either one of those two things. And so just at a high level, general thoughts, views on, say, the America Party, Elon Musk's new initiative, and the Republican Party, are they going to make it?
Good question. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Trump. I think what he's doing is great. I think he is, on the whole, making a positive benefit. I also understand why Elon was really pissed off with him, because I've been in the same boat as Elon, and Elon is correct. Sorry, Trump, you are wrong on this point. You're increasing the national deficit by another $2 trillion. That's not acceptable. That's not what Doge got into government for. They were there about trying to cut down all the government waste and efficiency, and here you are with your big, beautiful bill doing the opposite of sort of what you promised and what we expected from you. I think it's too early to draw a conclusion on how that's going to play out. Donald Trump is a very smart man, but Elon Musk is also a very smart man. I think Elon's probably going to win this in the long term. I think as somebody pointed out the other day, Elon wants to go to Mars. So he's got battery technology because he needs that. He's got solar technology. He's got satellites. He's got communications. He's got AI. He's got robots.
Tunnels.
He's got tunnels. He's going to Mars. Okay, that's his goal. Trump is more sort of focused on trying to be America first. And I think that's a prudent way to go. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years. I still think Elon is right in what he's saying. So in that specific case, I'm more on Elon's side than I'm on Trump's. I also understand from a political perspective that Trump has to make compromises, because that is what politics is about. He will have big interests coming to him and lobbying him about certain different things and where the money needs to be spent. So I understand that to retain his power and control, he has to do those things. So the problem, as we always describe, the problem is the government. But you're never going to get a solution if you're asking the problem to solve itself.
You can't expect the system to come up with a solution for the system.
It won't, because the solution is to eliminate the system.
In a sly roundabout way.
Yeah, and it is necessary to have government. You can't go full anarchy on the scale of population that we're talking about. There are certain things that need to be accounted for because they are not accounted for by the private market. And those are things that are public goods. The stuff that falls into those categories is very broadly is national defense, local defense, justice system, the emergency services, and national level infrastructure. That is the role of government. They will do it incredibly inefficiently, but it has to happen because because there's no price for public goods, the private market will never, ever provide those goods. And you also don't want private interests controlling things that are natural monopolies. The state highways in New Zealand. Like, am I okay with a toll on those? I am. We pay a toll on our fuel tax anyway. But if a private interest owned that, then they could prevent you having access to necessary things that you need to get on with your life because it's a natural monopoly. And they could then, because it's a monopoly, charge exorbitant prices. Supernormal profits would come out of that monopoly. And there's also no way to compete with them, because we're going to have 50 state highway ones all right next to each other. It makes no sense and it wouldn't happen. So you require some sort of government system to take care of the things that the private market will not take care of. But everything else should be left to the private market because there's good competition in there and they produce products and things in a way that meets their clients' needs.
Staying on Trump, I guess, here for this one. So I was in Las Vegas a month and a bit ago, went to the Bitcoin 2025 concert.
Nice.
Concert. Did I say concert?
Conference?
Got a good concert, to be honest. It was also kind of like a political rally, too. I think it added in a really interesting dimension because for me personally, anyway, I was able to sit in the front row to see JD Vance speak and seeing he was an actual human. Sometimes, when you see these clips on TV, you can't see what's happening before and after the cameras are on and off and how he interacts with his bodyguards and how he waits for others to go first. And anyway, the thing that really struck me is the way that they talked about Bitcoin wasn't just as a potential fix for the national debt. It could be. It
is in El Salvador.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, actually, let's start there then, because Max and Stacy Kaiser, who are very, very close to the Bitcoin scene, I bumped into them in the hallway, got my photo taken with Stacy, one of my heroes from ages ago. Very interesting characters. What's his name? Bukele, right? Yeah. So he has turned around the country in so many ways. It's got a long way to go, I know, But Bitcoin, when you wrap yourself around Bitcoin, whether it's yourself, your company, or your country, it changes things.
It eliminates corruption
How?
because everything is transparent. The biggest gift that we could give to every single person in the entire world is that your governments and your councils and your organizing bodies that look after the public goods and natural monopolies, you can see every single one of their transactions. So you wouldn't even need to employ auditors or the IRD or the Reserve Bank. All of that cost would cease to exist immediately because the taxpayers union would audit every single transaction that you did on every single second in real time.
The AI would do it anyway, right?
Well, that's what the agentic agents are going to end up doing.
Yeah.
And while we shouldn't necessarily listen to the agents, those agentic AI agents, about all the decisions, because we need to have some humanity in this as well, it does mean that there is more accountability and basically the elimination of corruption, because you can see every transaction, every single transaction, no matter how big or small, where council members are spending money on coffee, on fuel, on accommodation, on clothes, on whatever it is they spend it on. All of that is publicly available. All my transactions are publicly available. If somebody wanted to audit me, here's my wallet address. Feel free. I'm not doing anything.
That's why criminals, they're not going to do it on something that is so transparent as that. It's just such a stupid argument, right?
They used to, and the police are going back into transactions in the past and going and knocking on people's doors. It's like, well, you're involved in a criminal drug ring, child sexual abuse, human trafficking. That 8,000 people in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So it's just that behavior is unacceptable, but it becomes very clear if all the transactions are tracked. And people get worried about, my privacy. It's like, okay, but unless you know all my wallet details, which you don't, like, it's hard to track my transactions in that sort of space. But we would know our wallet details for our elected representatives. They would be publicly available information.
And once you know the wallet details, you know
You can see everything. Yep.
So right now in the current political system, it's not unusual for people not only to not be able to see what's going on, but they don't understand what's going on either, right? And I guess that's how so much of these dodgy things can actually occur. And we ultimately pay the price for all these dodgy things.
Yep.
Whereas I guess going back to El Salvador, the more transparent it becomes, the more sunlight disinfects all that sort of rubbish, right?
Yep.
Which is pretty cool.
We're in an odd situation where obfuscation of activity has become the norm. And the thing that people are most concerned about is the government tracking their spending. It's like, I get it, but what you're then describing to me as the problem is that the government is allowed to impose its will on your private property. And if we move to a blockchain system and we tokenize all your property by Ethereum, just for example, and we keep all your wealth and assets in Bitcoin and you do your transactional stuff in XRP, all of which is publicly available, trackable information, it also forces the government into that position as well. So we can see what they are doing and how they're doing things to us. And then it is less of a problem.
You're forcing them to play the same game that you're playing. And it's not fear of the government, because the government in theory should be representing us.
Should be,
but let's be honest. I won't complete that sentence, but if you're hiding stuff from everybody else that you're living right next to in society, then it means you're probably doing something that's not quite right. And that's the beauty of this, is that you can't do that.
We currently can't trust our government. Every single government in the world is guilty of massive amounts of corruption, money laundering, obfuscation of funds, and stealing from all of its people. We can't trust them anymore. So we have to move to zero trust.
Yeah.
It's the only way to deal with this.
Yeah.
And I don't think there will be any choice for our politicians at all. They're going to be railroaded into cryptocurrency irrespective of what they do. There's no saving the US dollar. It has gone past its tipping point as the world reserve currency.
Yeah.
And if you are paying attention, you should start pricing everything in Bitcoin. And then what you'll notice is a divergence of the fiat in Bitcoin like this. And as your Bitcoin becomes more valuable, it allows you to have better purchasing power with other people you want to interact with. And all of those transactions are voluntary and consensual. So you're always getting more value than what you're spending. That's the whole point. But the government can't do anything about it. once we take sovereignty of our currency back out of the centralized system, there's nothing that they can do.
Yeah.
So this is happening inevitably one way or another. I talk about this with the New Zealand police because I organize the conference with them. They know what I'm up to. They know what I'm doing. I talk about this with the Reserve Bank at the conference when I get the chance. I've been on stage with the director of central bank digital currencies and the New Zealand digital dollar in that space. So I can see what they're trying to do, but they're going to end up being railroaded into this no matter what they do. It's happening. It is now inevitable.
Yeah.
Yep.
But who's going to keep us safe if the government can't do it, right?
Does the government keep you safe now? I don't think they do. What we're up to, 40 ram raids a day in New Zealand. There's 8,000 people a year in New Zealand are child sex trafficked or human slavery, working on fishing boats and welding. Chorus got pinged for that probably about 5 or 6 years ago. They were unintentionally using Indian, effectively slave labor as their technicians, and they had to do something about it. We're talking about 9, 10 guys to a room in a bunk getting paid a couple of dollars an hour tops. That kind of behavior is unacceptable. And so this just sheds light on the whole lot. And once we get the AI playing to that, it's going to make the police's job a lot easier to actually go after the people that are committing crimes. And I have to talk about the word crime here for a second. And the definition of that word has slightly changed. What it used to mean is damage to your individual property and your individual property rights. And what it has become is anything I don't like. So, that should be a crime. So if you make that a crime, you are taking away other people's ability to deal with their property in the way that they want to deal with it, even if you disagree with it. You don't have to do it. But if you make all the rules, you're preventing other people from doing it. The word crime has become more about trying to control people's actions rather than redressing actual criminal offenses where your property is being damaged by another individual. This is why the justice system is part of a public good, economic definition of public good, as in something that the market will not provide on itself. That has to be part of what the government does. And the reason for that is so that we can have non-violent dispute resolution between individuals over property right complaints. That's what the criminal justice system really is. And we have moved away from that to, so-and-so did something on his property next door to me that I don't like. It's like, but you don't get to ban him from doing that. What you do get to do is let everyone make their decisions. And if you or your property are damaged, you get to claim against the person who caused the damage. And that is the reasonable adult way to deal with these problems, rather than demanding that XYZ new law be introduced to prevent somebody doing something I don't like. But that's just your personal preference. And how would you feel if the role was reversed? The left globally is feeling this right now about cancel culture, because now the right, who's in power in America, is using cancel culture against the left. That's also not good. I don't like this, because we need to hear from people that have got interesting ideas. I certainly don't know everything. I know a lot of things, but I want to hear other people's interesting ideas about how we resolve these conflicts between individual property rights. And you can't do this with collectivism, because collectivism, nobody owns anything. What does that actually mean? There is no responsibility for the actions that people take. You go and I think there's a guy that just won the mayoral race in New York, I think.
Yeah.
He's a bloody communist. It's like, well, we want to reduce the prices of things in the supermarket.
Rent control, food price control.
Yeah. Well, what does that do to the supply and demand curve? Shortages. Or massive subsidies, which you're now paying out of your tax. So your tax just keeps going up. So you're not addressing the problem. And actually, the way to address the problem is to introduce or allow more competition in the market. We have a similar thing in New Zealand with our 2 big supermarket operators. That's not great. Foodstuffs and restaurant brands, that is not a great set of competition. And we get this cost of living going up all the time because they have the bargaining power and effective monopolies to do this. I think, as Milton Friedman keeps saying, I think Thomas Sowell said it as well, it's like, what actually causes monopolies? The government. Because these people have money, the CEOs, they've got lots of money for the business. They can go and take politicians out to dinner and do whatever and give them little surreptitious gifts and send them on trips and convince them to do things, which we can't do. We don't have that kind of access to politicians. And it allows them to put in things in place, which they pretend are under the guise of safety, of minimum wage, of reducing the cost of living, of doing this. Walmart's a great example. Walmart is in favor of increasing the minimum wage because for them that means nothing. But for every other mom and pop store where a Walmart's put into place in America, all of those businesses cease to exist. They cannot keep up with the minimum wage requirements. They can't keep up with the general insurance. They can't keep up with the 401ks, with the KiwiSaver, with all of these extra expenses added on to top. So they cease to exist. And so from Walmart's perspective, this is fantastic because now everybody works at Walmart and everybody buys everything from Walmart. It's actually anti-competitive behavior. How they're not getting caught by antitrust laws is beyond my comprehension.
You know, the weird thing about that, though, is from an investor's perspective, we all like to think of ourselves as ethical investors, right? But if you were an investor, if you were a shareholder in Walmart, you want your dividend to keep coming in. You want the share price to keep going up. But in order for us to get that increase in wealth, it means they have to become larger and larger and larger and larger, which means that they just have to get profit at all costs, right?
Yep.
It blows my mind just how many contradictions there are in how one could build wealth. And where I want to go next is what I think another strategy is that the U.S. might be working on here. It's not just about potentially dealing to the U.S. debt problem by holding Bitcoin on like setting up a Bitcoin reserve. That's definitely a factor. But there's a quote here that I'll read in J.D. Vance's presentation. He said, "The People's Republic of China doesn't like Bitcoin." Well, we should be asking ourselves, why is that? Why is our biggest adversary such an opponent of Bitcoin? And if the Communist Republic of China is leaning away from Bitcoin, then maybe the United States ought to be leaning into Bitcoin.
I mean, I agree with J.D. Vance. I like him as well.
But it's what really struck me is that they're not hiding anything. Like they're basically saying acquiring Bitcoin is a strategy to counterbalance the rising influence of China. We've talked about the individual, the company, the country. Now we're talking about potentially global conflict, which is occurring. So at a level, and there's always parallels between conflict and money, it seems. So at a level, do you think we are at World War III right now?
Yes. World War III started the day that George Floyd died. That is when World War III started. That is our Franz Ferdinand moment. When George Floyd died, and whatever you think about that, I'm not making any judgments one way or another. That is when World War III started.
Why?
Because it allowed the civil unrest to explode massively in the US. And all of that civil unrest is driven by George Soros, who is a Nazi collaborator, sent his own Jews to death camps, and funds open societies. That is unacceptable.
Now, some people listening might have heard that for the first time. So George Soros, just for background, incredibly rich individual. He's incredibly generous, maybe in his words, but his money goes towards foundations and causes that serve very distinct purposes. So do you want to just unpack what he is basically up to, or what his foundation is up to?
He's a Marxist, and he always bets against the market. That's how he made all his money, betting against the British pound, breaking the bank, so to speak. He always bets against everybody. He's a very negative sort of personality in that respect, and he will always bet against you. And the biggest thing that bets against the West is communism. So that's what he funds. He funds civil unrest in countries. That is what he funds.
Is that what we're seeing in New Zealand, Australia, Canada,
Yes.
US, UK?
Yes, everywhere. And I have no problem, being a libertarian, I have no problem with people trying to seek a better life in a different country. I don't really have a specific problem with immigration.
I'm from a different country, John. So
exactly.
You'd have a problem with me.
No, not at all. God, look at what Canada's doing at the moment with Mark Carney. That later. I don't have a problem with any of that. And I think in a very libertarian society, that would all be possible. You do need to, when you immigrate to another country, you need to adopt that culture and then merge and integrate with that culture. That is the obligation that is on you for moving to country. And that's the same if I move to Australia or the US or I move to Spain, I still learn Spanish. So that's what we should be expecting from our immigrants on that perspective. But I actually have no problem with people seeking better lives anywhere. I do wish a lot of them would stay in their own countries and make those countries better. I think the US and the West tends to steal a lot of intellectual capital from those countries by offering large amounts of, in my opinion, completely fake money to come in. You're taking all the best people away from India, from Pakistan, from Iran. So now there are no good people in those countries to be able to build those countries into first world countries, which they can do. Look how smart India is. 1.7 billion people. India is a big rising power. I'd love to align with India more. But they're genuine, hardworking people that have a good understanding of economics generally. They're quite smart. They're very technologically developed. They're investing in technology. India's come such a long way. So has China. And we've exported and outsourced all of our manufacturing to these other locations, partially because they don't have minimum wage and they use slave labor, particularly Uyghur Muslims in China. That's just one example. But they have all our manufacturing now. It's like, well, that's great. But then what is it that we are doing? What is the productive work that we're doing on our end? And how are we generating income to buy those things from those companies, from those countries? And look at how good China has become as a result of being a bit more capitalist and doing a bit more trading. They have come a long way from the Communist Party of Mao Zedong. A long way. There's a lot more freedom in China now than there ever has been before. And irrespective of what you think about the Communist CCP and the creepy agents that they have all over the place controlling what people are doing, in a lot of China, people just don't care. What the government does is kind of irrelevant to them. The government's banned Bitcoin. Does it stop them? No. They can still transfer value in Bitcoin. And so there's nothing that the government can do about this. And I would love to see people be more economically productive and more trade with each other rather than fighting with each other.
So let's just say we're in World War III. Start
We
with George
definitely
Floyd.
are. Yep.
And
I put it in my mate's calendar. A week after George Floyd got murdered, I said, this is the start of World War III. When 2030 comes around, you come and talk to me. That's the day it started.
there's more than one party, right, in this war. Who are the main parties in this war?
Sort of the BRICS alliance. So Russia, China, and they're also not natural allies. So they're in a bit of a weird sort of alliance here at the moment because of kind of the US dominance. And it is that sort of colonialism flavor of America exporting its culture to everywhere else. And while I might quite like that, it's not going to be suitable for China. It's just not the way they do things. They have a different culture. And that's not to say it's wrong or bad or anything like that, although there are some cultures that are better than others. But it is a rebellion against the US dominance. And it's taken China a very, very long time to get to this place. And they've made huge mistakes. The bridges are collapsing. There's ghost cities all over the place. They've tried a lot of things. But it comes back to they're producing a lot of the goods and services that we use. And that is the productive energy effort that everybody should really focus on. Because it's that trade that prevents the wars that are happening. And you get China doing the Belt and Road Initiative. But it's with yuan, which is valueless fiat currency. So once we get into this cryptocurrency space, China won't be able to do that anymore. They won't be able to deflate their own currency to buy influence in foreign nations. A, because we're able to see every single one of their transactions. So we know exactly where their influence is. And B, because they can't print that currency. They can't devalue their own currency to do this. They have to do something productive that the rest of the world wants to purchase to give them a positive trade balance so they can go and invest in other countries and then trade with those countries by building infrastructure. That's what the West should be doing. And I've always said this. This is my position on war. It's very, very simple. There are only two options. You either commit to genocide or you build hospitals. So that's the only choices. Look at Afghanistan and Iraq. How many terrorists did we create out of that? A crazy amount. A crazy amount. And you'll keep doing it. Why? You killed their father, their mother, their brother, their uncle, their daughter, their sister, their kids. Of course they're going to be like that. If you build a hospital and save their father, they're going to love you. So that's the only choices. You either wipe out all the terrorists all in one go. If anybody came to me with war, that's what I say. So are you willing to kill everybody? The answer is going to be no. It's like, right, well, then we build hospitals then. It's the only other option. Why? We save people. We make people's quality of life better. We train doctors in the area. Medical is a big part of everybody's society. If you save somebody's brother, uncle, father, sister, daughter, child, they're going to love you. They're going to love you. If you blow them up with an IED or a rocket or a bomb from a B-2 stealth bomber that nobody saw coming, you are going to breed decades and generations of resentment against what you're doing. You're not helping. You're hurting people.
Personally, I think there are things going on in this country which could be said to be coming from other countries. I'm uncomfortable with being too specific, but I'll totally let you go for it. But
as a result of my chats with the ChatGPT, I've decided just to say everything exactly the way I think it and not worry about sort of how it comes across. So I'm aware of that, and I'm willing to accept the personal responsibility for what I say. But I mean what I say. I don't say this stuff lightly. This is serious. There are millions of people dying all around the world all the time for stupid wars over basically nothing. A lot of these are religious wars, and they're not wars over specific things or property rights or stuff that we can quantify objectively. It's subjective. Like Iran and the Muslim populations of Palestine, they want to genocide the Jews. That's what they want to do. They tell us that literally all the time. They're the ones that are keeping this war going over here. Has Israel dealt with this in a good way? No. So Israel is now in that position of, if I was Benjamin Netanyahu, I'd be asking, well, am I going to genocide the Palestinians? And this is what people say all the time. And I think when you've got a population like that, who are determined to genocide you, then genociding them is probably the appropriate response. However, if instead of sending in the tanks, you went to Palestine and you built hospitals and infrastructure and roads, and you just ignored all the Hamas terrorists, you ignore the Holocaust, no, we're just going to build you infrastructure here. That's what we're going to do. This is what our foreign aid is for. If you did that, all of this would cease because they have no reason to fight you, because you've now educated the kids. You've saved their parents. You've built roads so they can engage in commerce and trade better than they could before. So I think that's a much better option than trying to kill people. Because killing people it causes them to want to kill you.
Weird how that works, right?
I mean, it's really blatantly obvious. I don't know how we haven't learned this lesson. It's been going on for thousands and thousands of years already.
So can Bitcoin fix this? Can Bitcoin literally fix the world and stop wars?
Yes. I think that is the only non-violent solution that we have.
Okay. So
non-violence is the important part. Because I talk to a lot of people in New Zealand. I talk to a lot of people around the world. And everyone that build that emotional frustration and anxiety, and it comes out as violence. And so we've definitely got a lot of people everywhere in the West, in China, in Russia, everywhere. It's like, well, I can't do anything. I have to kill people. It's like, you don't. All you have to do is move all of your assets to Bitcoin and stop funding the governments that are sending you and your kids to war.
Defund the government.
Defund the government. So
stop using their money.
They have to provide you a service now if you have sovereignty over your currency. The IRD can reach into your bank account in New Zealand and take your money. So can the IRS. They can do that whenever they want. They just call the bank and say, we want all his accounts blocked. This is called civil asset forfeiture laws, which we have in New Zealand, disappointingly introduced by David Seymour, I think, which I'm not a fan of, but it was also a requirement under our mutual evaluation for anti-money laundering compliance. That is required by, I think it's the Wolfsburg Group's the banking organization. The Egmont Group is the police financial intelligence units group. And they've decided globally that's what we need to do because criminal activity would take place and we couldn't hold their assets to a point where after the trial, and that would allow them time to move their assets to places that we couldn't get to. So I understand the reasoning and logic behind these rules, but what it actually gets used for, particularly in the US, is seizing people's assets, reversing the burden of proof so that you have to prove that you're innocent to get your assets back, while you've had your assets stolen. So now you can't afford to do anything like that.
Guilty until proven innocent, right?
And at the end of it, you've spent all of those assets. So now you're back to zero.
Got it.
So there are big problems. It is theft. It is the big problems in the way that these laws are being manipulated.
Yeah.
They are tools as well, but we can't trust our government. We can't trust our officials or our bureaucrats to act honorably anymore. And we don't know who they are. We don't know what their personality is like. There's too many of us for that.
Right.
So we have to move to a system where that trust is no longer required.
And that system is Bitcoin, because it's
more specifically blockchain.
Blockchain.
Yeah. Because it might not be Bitcoin.
Sure, I see what you're doing. Yeah, you're trying to allow for the fact that in the future there could be more solutions, not just through Bitcoin. But
that's right.
The idea is that if you fix the money, you fix the world, because effectively you're defunding the types of government activity that are actually responsible for all the stuff that we are so good at just blaming the other side for. It's actually the government.
It's the government. It doesn't matter if it's Republican, Democrat, Labor, National, Greens, ACT. It does not matter. The problem is the government. It is the government that needs to pull their heads in and be severely restricted down to looking after public goods and the natural monopolies. That's it. And then we're good. And then everybody else can be productive and innovative, and they can do the things they want to do. Whether I agree with them or not is completely irrelevant. You should have the choice to do whatever you want to do with your labor, your time, your resources, and you should accept the personal responsibility for the consequences of your decisions.
Is Bitcoin already starting, or will it start some sort of political revolution which will eventually lead to the reduction in the size of government?
I think that is inevitable, yes.
Wow.
And so we're seeing that with the America First Party. It may come in different forms. Don't focus on the form that it comes in. Focus on the fundamentals that underpin whatever that movement ends up being. And you don't even need to have a political party. If everybody in New Zealand just decided to use Bitcoin, which I think would be fantastic, if they all just decided to use Bitcoin, then when it comes to paying your income tax, you look at the idea and say, right, well, I actually only use these services here, but I take care of the rest of these privately over here. So I should only pay for this one's here. And that might end up being, it will end up being a combination of national defense, local defense, justice system, emergency services, and national infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay.
But then it makes people not hate and fight the government either, because they're actually doing the things that we need. They're providing valuable service in exchange for our labor. And that's now worth paying. It'll annoy a lot less people with income tax and GST and ACC and God, everything else, because you'll be able to directly see how much your roads are being funded, how much your schools are being funded, how much your hospitals are being funded. If there are any problems there with mismanagement of the hospitals, who in the hospitals is getting all of this money? Is it going to frontline services? What we know at the moment is going to a bunch of bureaucrats that don't know anything about medicine. Well, okay, but you can probably clean a lot of those out. Get rid of the bureaucracy. Get rid of the middlemen. That's what Bitcoin does. Yeah. Eliminates the middlemen, eliminates the banks, because we can do peer-to-peer transactions. I don't need them anymore. So yes, it is going to solve, and it was invented to solve specifically these problems.
Yeah, amazing how it's working.
Working
awesome.
As intended.
Yeah, awesome. John, really appreciate this chat. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of that. I certainly have. It's given me a lot to think about when I do the edit of this podcast as well. I usually watch these things and listen to these things a few times during the process, and that's when it's my opportunity to kind of learn. So thank you for that. Where can people follow you, or dig into a little bit more that you put out there?
Probably, I post mostly on Instagram. What is my name on that? I think it's @AaronEveron, but I use my real name on that. I also post a little bit on Facebook, which is just John Alcock on there. And I also post on LinkedIn, again, just under John Alcock on there as well.
Awesome.
So that's where you can see some of the content it's mostly reshares of your podcast.
Yes.
Because you make good points. You make really good points. You have really good guests. You have really interesting conversations. I think you're really hitting on some of the really important points. So if you want to see that kind of stuff, you can follow me, you can follow Darcy, and you're going to get it.
That's good.
Exactly the way it is, without fluff.
That's good. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much, John.